Okay, good evening, everybody. We are here with our final of 8 Real Talk episodes. We are Real Talk number 8, Fines, Fees, in Our Courts. We are here with 3 Unite endorsed candidates. We have Hilary Wheatley Taylor, who is a candidate for Mount Lebanon Dormont Magisterial District Court. We have Chelsa Wagner, who is a candidate for Court of Common Pleas, and Wrenna Watson, who is also a candidate for Court of Common Pleas. So before we begin, I will have each of these candidates introduce themselves and provide a little bit more detail. And then if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A or on the Facebook feed, which we will then go through at the end. I will start with Hilary, since you are at the top there.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Hilary Wheatley Taylor. I'm a candidate for magistrate in the district serving Mount Lebanon and Dormont, which has an open seat due to a retirement of the previous magistrate. I'm a Mount Lebanon resident. I've lived in Mount Lebanon since 2005. And since that time, I've been an active community member and volunteer in various ways. Since 2002, when I graduated from law school, I've served as a civil litigator in the Commonwealth on a variety of cases on behalf of consumers, business owners, property owners, and our neighbors in tax appeals and other real estate related matters. I'm a progressive Democrat endorsed by the Labor Council and Unite and the Stonewall Democrats and more. So I'm thrilled to be joining Chelsa and Wrenna for this conversation tonight.
Okay, and Chelsa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, thank you. Happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk. I'm Chelsa Wagner. So most people know me as the Allegheny County Controller. I'm serving in my 3rd term, about my 10th year of being Allegheny County Controller. Prior to that, I was a state representative elected there for 3 terms, but have been an attorney for 16 years. I started working in litigation on the plaintiff side, but because I shortly thereafter ran for office and am certainly proud to say that my commitment has been to that oath of office, I transitioned to some more general practice because of course you can't have 2 positions that are driving your schedule as it works with politics. So I point to a number of the matters that I've worked on over the years in that public advocacy role that I think are really important to look at how we need to really drive reform to speak truth to power, but then have the skills to really turn around these very deeply entrenched bureaucracies. So things ranging from healthcare access to some very specific measures within the jail and pushing for different reforms and achieving them at the county jail. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to do there. But also I know some of the things we'll get to talk about this evening, specifically with fines and fees reforms, some of the work that we have ongoing that we've been happy to participate in. So I appreciate it again and looking forward to talking with everybody.
Okay, and Wrenna, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. And I think that I'm hearing, I'm sorry, I'm hearing there you go. You hear any reverb?
No.
Okay, great. I want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for hosting this event and thank you for inviting me. And I am Wrenna Watson. I'm a candidate for judge of the Court of Common Pleas. I'm a lifelong resident for many generations of Allegheny County, Pittsburgh. And I raised my daughter as a single mom. I stay with my 98-year-old dad after his wife of 45 years passed. And I've been a 29-year practicing attorney. And I've represented thousands of children and families and members of our communities in every division of the court. And for 26 of my 29 years, I have sat as a judge in the minor judiciary. I have decided over 50,000 cases. I sat as a judge of the Pittsburgh Magistrates Court. I heard every sort of case they hear down there. I had 22,000 cases there because, as you know, particularly in the when there was Pittsburgh City Magistrates Court, that was a very high volume case. We heard all of the city police cases. And I have chaired simultaneously, in fact, the first Black to simultaneously chair both the Pittsburgh Planning Commission and the Pittsburgh Zoning Board hearings for 8 years. I was a Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board hearing officer for Western Pennsylvania and Erie. And I think most important of my judicial experience, I am and continue to be for 26 years, a mental health hearing officer. And mental health has become a very acknowledged and very recognized issue in all of our communities now, but it actually has been for a very long period of time, even before my 26 years of experience. And that experience has allowed me to, it's helped me to do what I do from the bench in my other circumstances. And the things that I note, and I ask everybody, if you had to come to court or your family member or a community member, what type of experience would you like them to have? And people that have been in my courtroom will tell you that I'm fair. I listen to both sides of the case before I make a decision, and I treat people with respect. And so mental health's not new to me. Treating people with respect is not new to me. Being fair and listening to cases. Those are things that I've been doing over 50,000 cases in 26 years. And we need this in our court. I bring this to our court, tried and true, not maybe. I've done it. And so I thank you again for being here, and I look forward to, answering the questions that you have regarding these fines and fees.
Great. Okay. Well, I am, I don't think I introduced myself. I'm Hilary Bendick from Grassroots Justice of South Hills, and Elaine France is from Mount Lebanon Organization for Racial Equity. And so we're going to be the moderators tonight. And more so thankfully provides this format for us. So I'm going to jump right in. Okay, so and start off with, just these amazing stats. The Pennsylvania Attorney General reports that from 2011 to 2020, the Court of Common Pleas in Allegheny County successfully collected and dispersed more than $153 million from criminal defendants. And magisterial district judges in Allegheny County collected and dispersed more than $3 million more from criminal defendants. First off, those are amazing numbers. I mean, that is a lot of money in that time period being collected from criminal defendants for fines and fees. What are all the different ways and reasons that people in these courts can be ordered to pay money? And I guess that anybody can kind of start us off.
Well, you can virtually get a fine related to anything that you're convicted for. I will say that in magistrates court, in Pittsburgh Magistrates Court, you generally have an up to $300 fine that you can impose upon someone. Generally, if you're imposing a fine, it's because you've taken jurisdiction over the case, or it was a summary offense and you had jurisdiction in the first place. There were times that I took jurisdiction on cases that if it's a misdemeanor or a felony, you're really hearing it as a preliminary hearing and deciding whether this case should go to court, should be held for a big court, for the court that Chelsa and I are asking to be seated in. Oftentimes, I took control of those cases and did them as a summary case because I didn't think they warranted being sent up to big court. And in those instances, you may impose a fine. I said up to $300. You could, and there's other creative things that you can do, but so pretty much anything that you're convicted of, whether it's on a summary offense or a felony or a misdemeanor, you can have a fine imposed. On the common pleas level, some of those fines are statutorily imposed. Say, for instance, with ARD hearings, they have very specific guidelines that tell you this is the fine, first time offense, and that it'll change with regard to what your blood alcohol content was. So if you're a first time offender and you have the lower level, then your fine's lower. So is the amount of time that you would spend in jail. So then you got a mid range and then you got a high range, and your fines will be commensurate with which range you fall in. Additionally, when you come back on your second offense, third offense, fourth offense, those fines, again, low level, mid level, high range on the blood alcohol content, they're statutorily imposed. There might be a range from this, from one amount to another, but those are all set statutorily, and a judge can decide in those ranges. But you can be fined kind of for anything, any crime that you're convicted of, and certainly for traffic offenses. Traffic offenses also have set fines.
And in addition to fines, I think in that number.
Oh, there's some funny stuff going on with your noise. Your sound is strange.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
Oh, there it
It's
goes.
better. Yeah. In addition to the fines, we've got court costs, right, which are also fees, and then sometimes restitution. And I think that $153 million probably includes all three of those charges that we're likely collecting from defendants, some of which are mandatory, some of which have a range, and some of which are optional. But Wrenna's right. I mean, every single charge that comes before the court is likely associated with fines, fees, and restitution.
Can anyone speak to fees?
What specifically would you like to know, Elaine?
What is a fee? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm coming from really like what is a fee? Like, I understand a fine. I kind of understand restitution, but what kind of fee are people paying?
Like a $5 court computer system management fee, or a $10 constable training fee. It's all these just add-on charges that the courts and the Commonwealth have allowed to be charged in addition to the fine for criminal defendants as a way to fund the judicial system in lieu of raising taxes on the Commonwealth's residents.
And they call them court costs, cost of court. And they have a cost of court associated with every case in the magistrate's levels. And then there's the cost of court associated with a court case in a common pleas court. And those are separate from the fines. So when you walk away, you may have a fine and the cost of court.
And I would just add that some of these, I think, as Wrenna alluded to or spoke to earlier, in terms of many of them being of a statutory nature. And I'm just looking at an example in front of me of a DUI cost sheet. And on that, you're looking at $11 for a state court cost, $9.40, and all the way till you are in excess of about $1,000. So it adds up quite a lot. Law library user fee, district attorney conviction. And I think it's important to note that anything that is pled is also categorized as that conviction. But then across the state, there are going to be many that are uniform, but then within each county, you also have the ability to have different fees assessed, just like you would in, say, a filing for a marriage license that's different cost across all counties.
Additionally, there are some of those costs. If you ever looked at like a ticket, like one of the yellow traffic tickets that you get, not the little white ones with the pink or the purple on them, because those are just from the parking court. But the yellow ones come from city police officers. And if you notice over in where they show you what your fine is or total cost, there's got to be at least 5 different categories that they don't even have to put a number in. They're just the set fee that you're going to pay every time anybody has a ticket. Then on top of that, they have a fee that's associated with whether you're speeding and how many miles over, because there's different fees for different miles over. Or if it's run a red light. These are called moving violations. Anything that's a moving violation has a different fine that's associated with, and that'll be put in there as well. But then you add on all of these other things. And one of those things I'd like to say that we haven't talked about is a like a victims services sort of donation goes into victims type fund.
Yeah,
and I don't think, as Chelsa was indicating, I don't think $1,000 is probably the lowest you will pay on any DUI or type situation. That's about the lowest. They say it's an expensive crime, and they call it a white collar crime or a businessman's crime. and there are a lot of expenses associated with that, especially when you get multiple offenses.
So I have the reason I'm particularly interested in this personally is I had, just by coincidence, I'm a historian, and so I had to sit in the records office at the Court of Common Pleas, the big, building, and in the records office, I sat there for, I don't know, about a month off and on, and people kept on coming through because that was where they had to arrange their fee schedules, right, and like how they were going to be paying. And as I was sitting there, it was just the most depressing and horrible thing, because these people, many of whom were clearly impoverished, they were clearly, living off Social Security checks, or they had just gotten out of prison. And, it's like their first day out of prison and they're standing in line and they're waiting. And then they're finding out that they're going to have to send like this monthly check to to the Commonwealth, like for $37 a month, or like, or sometimes for $500 a month. But often it's like, well, you just have to pay $37 a month. But it's like very clear this person is not going to be paying $37 a month, right? Or like maybe their grandma comes with them and their grandma's going to be paying it or whatever, And so I was like watching that, and I kept on thinking all that was new to me, and I was like, what is going on? So, which is leading into the question of coming from the perspective of the person who comes in, and we've kind of already gotten a little bit into that, but like what kind of range of let's say, starting with maybe at the magistrate district judge level, what kind of range, if you're convicted of something, can you kind of like expect to come out with, like what, what I mean? Because we talked a little bit about a couple of examples, but maybe talk more broadly, like what are people walking out of the justice system, owing?
Yeah, there's actually a link to that. To answer your question, there's a really good 4-part series from Public Source about court fines and costs. And they did, one of the parts was outlining, pulling docket sheets and saying, if you're charged with X crime at the magistrate level and you are, have a sentence imposed, what's the total monetary obligation you're walking away with? And they gave 2 very specific examples. The first was going 30 miles an hour in a 25 mile per hour zone. The statutory fine for that is $25, but once you add on the mandatory fees, costs, and surcharges, you walk away with a judgment, so to speak, or a debt to the court of $150. Mm-hmm. And for a disorderly conduct charge at the magistrate level, again, you have a $300 mandatory fine, plus fees, surcharges, constable search warrant or arrest warrant fees. And you can walk away with a debt to the court of $625. So you're more than, in that instance, you're more than doubling it. And for a speeding ticket where you're going 5 miles an hour over, it's 5 times, 6 times the underlying fine. And at the Court of Common Pleas level, I think it just gets exorbitantly, significantly.
Like what does happen? Because I swear, because as I sat there in that court, I heard some really big numbers being thrown around what people owed. Like, how much do people come out of like Court of Common Pleas owing?
So I can give you a stat that's a statewide stat. I unfortunately don't have the range, but the median amounts are in the ballpark of $1,100 to $1,500. And that was from a deeper dive that ACLU had done recently. And that was to support, they submitted, and we worked with them to submit an amicus brief to the Supreme Court. There's this matter pending presently in front of our Supreme Court that is whether or not courts are required to do an ability to pay assessment. So I unfortunately don't have, the lowest number and the highest number in front of me, but it looks to be, they actually set it apart for defendants with private counsel versus those with public defenders. And you see those with private counsel are typically, or the median is $1,500, and then those with public defenders are $1,100.
And that, when you think of that median for people with public defenders only being $300 less than people who can afford and have been deemed to be able to pay for private counsel, that just seems to make an obvious conclusion that an ability to pay is not being considered. I mean, if you've been deemed so poor that you qualify for a public defender, an $1,100 fines, fees, and restitution amount might as well be $1 million, right? Like for some people.
Absolutely. Right.
So with the two cases that, the two instances that Hilary spoke about, one, she said that in a disorderly conduct, you have a mandatory $300 fine. I never heard of a mandatory.
Well, I
$300
think,
fine.
yeah,
And I'm not talking
maybe I
about
missed.
you, Hilary. I thought you
may
were
have
reading
misspoke
that
there.
from public source or whatever it was. And in my experience, that's absolutely not the case. You have
Okay.
the ability to go up to $300 fine, but not a
Okay.
mandatory $300
Okay.
fine. Additionally, if you're driving 5 miles over, first of all, you shouldn't get a ticket. And any judge that for the most of them, pretty much any judge that I know, they're going to throw it out and not give you any fine if you're only going 5 miles over. And although what she indicated in terms of, what the fine was and then adding on all of these charges, that's absolutely correct. But on a 5 mile over, that should be thrown out in the first place. I used to do, we had things have changed a little bit with the medical marijuana situation going on. But when I was a magistrate, the new law had come into play with the under 30 grams of marijuana being considered to be for personal use. And you could take control of that and not send that up to a common pleas court for a hearing. And customarily, and mostly what pretty much anyone did was converted that into a disorderly conduct. And I would give a $50 fine on something like that, and no community service. Some of my colleagues, though, were given $300 fines, 275 hours of community service. Now, who does that? You're not going to come up with the money to pay that. And you don't have 270, community service is wonderful. And there are instances where it's very appropriate and helpful, and it's a good thing. So I'm not saying it's not good, but $275 because you had a joint in your pocket, that just doesn't make sense to me. And when I was reading over some of the information that you presented with, it sounds like, wow, where they're just trying to make money off of. And to me, it's poor people and don't have the ability, because I don't agree with the fact that everyone has the ability to pay fines and they choose not to. I absolutely do not agree with that. And I want to say something else. You talked about people coming out of jail and having huge fines, and some of them are multiple fines and costs, some that have been hanging over your head long before you went to jail on the one case that you went to jail for. You may have some other fines and costs. I know that I have represented people coming out of jail, and we've gone around to various magistrate offices and held hearings, and I would present the case and say, I think that, Judge, you should turn this into a time served and eliminate, the fines and costs. And they would, and try to give this person a chance at, okay, because they don't have a job, first of all. They just got out of jail. They probably have a family they're trying to take care of. And to have all of those fines hanging, thousands of dollars worth of fines hanging over your head, it just makes it impossible for them to succeed. And so I would try to help them get a fresher start and go around and represent them and get those dismissed. And it seemed like the magistrates were willing to do that. But then again, and I did it for free. So it's not like they had to pay me to go do that, because anybody could probably get an attorney to go do that. But, do you have to pay the attorney? How do you get the hearing set up? It's a whole process. Some of this there should be better ways of eliminating it. If you're doing jail time, maybe you need to have your fines just eliminated because of time served. You spent the time in jail. Let's give you a fresh start.
Yeah.
And I'd also just add just on those stats, because to Wrenna's points also, but that pans out in the data. So going from those stats of that median difference for an individual who's represented by a public defender, that essentially that analysis or that study showed that after 5 years, most individuals who had a private attorney did pay. Whereas I think it was about 60%, over 60% of those with a public defender after 10 years were not able to pay. And I think it's important to, speak to the real consequences, of what that means. So you could be arrested on a bench warrant for failure to pay. You could have your driver's license suspended. You can be denied resources such as food stamps, other kind of support for families, and you could be denied the ability to apply for a pardon. I know of one person who's a wonderful community activist who that occurred in that person's situation very recently.
So when I was a magistrate and cases would come before me, I would eliminate the costs and the fines. When you had a ARD case, there's always something that you were charged with that would allow the officer to stop you in the first place. You have to have a legitimate reason to stop. So that was usually some traffic offense, whether it was changing lanes without using a turn signal, or running a stop sign or a red light, or whatever, swerving, down the road. Whatever it was, there was some reason that they legitimately stopped the person. They were eligible for ARD, did the whole ARD, and then after they finished all of that and successfully completed their probation for the ARD and paid their fines and did whatever, took classes, did whatever community service, whatever was involved in the conditions, then they'd send them back down to magistrate's court to have a hearing on the traffic violation that actually made the stop legitimate in the first place. I just thought those were ridiculous. I threw all of those out. I know that there are people who don't do that, but that's ridiculous to me. That should have been part of the ARD hearing in the first place, but they don't do it like that.
So probably a good segue from, this might be me doing that. A good segue from what you had said about, if people serve time, they should not have fees. One of the reason that people have thought fees should be in place is saying that, people who commit crime should help pay for the justice system. And in one of the articles that Hilary had referenced in the public source article, the Republican chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee is quoted saying that two reasons Pennsylvania has fines and fees assessed on its justice system is the idea that wrongdoers should contribute to the cost of running the legal system and its supportive services, and two, to generate revenue outside of raising taxes. And I'm just curious, do these reasons make sense? And, is this really, preventing us from having our taxes raised?
I would say I don't think that has been shown. And as someone who used to be in the legislature, so I've seen bills over that time where, it's always that question of budgets, and they're always going up. So oftentimes I do think from a legislator's perspective that these seem to be the easier things to do that are hidden from the general public. But I think one of the big misconceptions in that statement is not recognizing that the persons who are coming before our courts are residents who are paying taxes and paying into this system already. But the point, and you referenced this in your first question. So from the data that our office has looked at, in Allegheny County, there's over 300 million court costs that are outstanding. It usually accrues at the rate of about 3 to 4 million per year. And we know that they are not going to be paid, most of these, but then you look at comparisons in other cities that have implemented different types of reforms, and you see that in those cities, it works well, and that, individuals are happy to do community service or something like that. So to me, it just goes to And that statement implies a real lack of understanding of generational poverty, and where people are coming into. They're not trying, for the most part, to avoid these. They simply don't have the ability to pay.
Mhm.
I'm in full agreement with that.
Me too.
So, so what kinds of things do these fines? I guess we got some, from your answer to the first question, we got some idea of this, but in general, like all this money that folks are paying over, their $37 a month that they're handing over, or whatever, what is that actually going to provide? I mean, I know like what kinds of, we talked about that, but what are all the where do the fines go?
A lot of different departments is how I mean, and again, I'm just looking at an example that's a DUI. You look at one category that's going to the state's general fund, and a number of them go to that. But then you have, so if you take some of these that are very specific to Allegheny County, some that are going to help fund the Department of Court Records. You see other examples here of a child care facility fee. That's one of the smaller ones at $3, record management fee. So, but I would go back to, again, from that legislative perspective, that I think, sometimes that's really a false argument, because there was a big increase of fees across the board, filing fees, not just talking in criminal courts, about 8 years ago, as I was county controller. And that was one of those things that was done to really do kind of a shell game. So you'd be able to move more money to the general fund. So I think it's just a failure to really recognize things. And I'm a big believer, when you're looking at funding a government, most people see it as just two options, which is, I think, an outdated view. So either you are increasing revenue or you are cutting services. But the third way, and the important way, is how do you do things differently? And I think that's that failure. I refer to our government as a culture of no. It's a lot easier than to completely re-engineer things, to just say, no, this is the way we've always done it, and we'll just tack it on in that endless kind of cycle.
And I would like to add into that, that when you look at filing fees, you're looking at, for the most part, citizens who have some sort of matter that they would like to pursue legally. And a part of them being able to do that is you have to pay a filing fee. And before they do it, they've decided that, and they're, I'm sure that their attorney, or if they're doing it pro se, I'm sure that they have become aware of, okay, there's filing fees that are associated with this, whether it's an estate, whether it's an adoption, whether it's a civil matter, whatever it is. Now in criminal, and those people, I don't want to say everybody has money, because we all don't, but most of the people that are coming in to pursue those types of matters have figured out, how am I going to pay for this? And they know that there's certain costs that are associated with trying to pay for that, including the filing fees. I'll even say that with opening an estate, I was telling someone recently, a client, well, you don't have a reason to open up an estate. Everything that's in this estate is going to automatically, by law, pass to the surviving husband. And so you don't have to open up an estate, because if you do, you have to pay the filing fee. You have to pay the inheritance taxes, if there are any, although there wouldn't be any for a husband. You have to pay costs to file an inventory. You have to pay to advertise. All of those things are associated when you open up a case. And I know attorneys that'll, hey, yeah, let's go open the estate, because then the attorney also has to get paid. And my approach generally is if we can find a way for you to not have to open up a estate, so that you don't have to pay all of these fees and waste your money, that's how I try to do that with them. And I think that when you're looking at the criminal cases, which is what we were talking about, these are not people who are making, well, I'm not saying they're not making a choice to be a part of the criminal system, because that's also a choice, but they they aren't people with money who are planning to have to pay these costs. And I think there's a difference. There's a lot of people who don't have the money to do that.
So it sounds like, and hearing Wrenna, you talk about kind of the discretion you had at magistrate. It sounds like magistrates have more discretion maybe than common pleas, where there is statutory fines and fees associated with the crimes there, and that magistrates, we should pay really good attention to both, obviously, who we elect, but certainly at the magistrate level, electing good judges who are aware of the impact of fines and fees and know how to assess ability to pay in both these positions is really important, because magistrates, you have the discretion as to whether to assess them, and at common pleas, you have to be able to assess one's ability to pay if there's a statutory fine that has to be assessed. If I understand kind of the difference in what your ability in this, assigning them.
Well, the one thing I think that is important is that you have to be reasonable. You can impose a fine, but be reasonable. Don't impose fines so that you're collecting revenues. Impose fines that are reasonable, that someone can have the ability to try to pay, or do something alternative like community service and things like that. And that's done on a case-by-case basis. You have to deal with the people that are standing in front of you, and different people have different abilities. In any case I've represented someone, I'm always asking for either a lower fine, no cost, or a payment plan, and maybe not only a payment plan, but a longer time to pay. And pretty much those are granted if you ask. In the common pleas level, everything is not statutory, and judges do have the ability, like everything for the DUI stuff, that's all fairly statutory. But for everything else, it's not always statutory. There might be at least ranges, but judges do have the ability to say, I'm not going to impose any court costs. I've asked for that. And the people I've represented generally are not people of wealth or of a lot, that have a lot of means. So I'm always asking for either no costs or low fines. And honestly, most times, judges, not all the time, but a lot of judges are willing to do that if you ask.
Okay. So I wanted to ask about what happens. Basically, why is it that sometimes people don't pay, or how do we think about all this vast quantity of unpaid debt that's currently out there, and sometimes even gets paid, turned over to debt collection agencies, and stuff like that. Some people say it's because people can't afford them, right? But then, some people, are out there saying, well, you can even charge just a little, put them on one of those long plans where you only have to do a little bit per month, and anybody can afford that. But I mean, I guess my question is this: it seemed to me like, and I guess this is more like that sort of like extreme experience watching what was going down in that office where people were paying their fees. I was like, there are some people in there, and I was like, let's say it's $5 a month, right? And I never heard anything that low. But let's say it's $5. This person doesn't have a checking account. This person doesn't drive a car. And it's not easy for them to get in here to pay it pay the fee at the office in cash, So even if they did have like $5, every month, it just isn't going to happen. But I guess I kind of wonder, how much, what judges can do. I mean, is there any way to kind of say, let's just don't have any fees for this person, because they're just not going to be capable of it.
So that's that matter that is in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in part right now. But it goes to this ability to pay assessment that a judge is able to do at any part of the criminal proceeding. It doesn't just have to come at a point where perhaps a defendant would be in default thereafter. And I think that's really important. And then that's where a judge may assess that defendant's ability to pay and the factors that would go more deeply into their resources or lack thereof. So, I mean, I always answer this type of question that judges have, so much agency in this area. But what you see also, you see a lot of disparities. And I think for Wrenna, and giving the examples of clients that she's represented, they were fortunate to have a good attorney who knew to ask. And you also have to recognize that there are so many pro se litigants throughout our court system, people who are representing themselves.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Sorry. And, so that, you don't know what you don't know. And so if you, in the unluck of the draw, get a magistrate or a judge that just is, I mean, in one sense, you could call it more conservative, but, just going that we've always assessed these, we're going to assess them, and isn't thinking any differently, it's obviously very problematic. And, it's not just that person, that individual, the impact, but it's the same thing as with other inequities in our justice system where you have a generational impact. If a person is getting $1,000 fine, for example, and they're only paying or able to pay $5 or $10 a month, my goodness, and these are on top of whatever sentence they were given. So, I mean, there is so much unfairness when you really look at it both anecdotally, but then also just by the stats.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Chelsa, it takes judges offering litigants just a little bit of kindness to ask, do you need a payment plan? Can you afford to pay this? Instead of waiting to be asked for the payment plan and setting people up for default. Like just asking that simple question, can you afford to pay your $150.50 fine? How much time do you need? And how low do the payments need to be so you can still put food on your table? Like that's all these magistrates and Court of Common Pleas judges need to ask so that people are not having to choose between food and fines.
Right.
Right.
So the other thing that happens, because you did ask earlier, what happens when someone doesn't pay their fines and costs? And so, and Chelsa offered some circumstances, but the other thing that happens is you get filed, a citation for contempt is filed, and you're hailed back into court, stand in front of probably the same judge that gave you the fine in the first place, and they can refine you at a magistrate's level, and probably even at common pleas level. They can say, oh, okay, well, I'll let you sit in jail for 30 days and that'll pay it off, and I hate to use the term, who does that? But who does that? It's like that's just not to me the way that you handle these circumstances when clearly the people that's standing in front of them don't have the ability to pay. And as Hilary indicated, they're trying to put food on their table. They're trying to keep their lights on. They got kids running around. They're trying to take care of it. It's you have to have some compassion.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's the idea of how do you get to court to pay, right?
Right. Yep.
You can't right now. You can't pay by credit card. You can't set up automatic debits from your checking account
if you have a credit card.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're having to take time off of work to get to court to take your cash or your money order. And it's just this vicious, endless cycle of losing a day's wages to pay your payment plan, or not making your payment plan so you can go to work. And then because you didn't make your payment plan, you have your driver's license suspended. And then you can't go to work. And then you can't, and none of this is laughable except for how absurd it is. And then if you lose your driver's license, you can't go to work, and then you don't have the money to make your payment plan. And it's just the cycle that just seems to repeat itself over and over again. And there's got to be a better way.
When I sat as magistrate at the city of Pittsburgh, again, similarly, I used to sit back and think about the fact that people that would come down just for a simple traffic ticket, whether it was a mover or a parker, it didn't matter. They had to take time out of, but usually they weren't taking time out of work. Most people, they might come down in the evening, but they're taking time out of their life to come down to a hearing because they felt like this violation was given in an unwarranted manner. And they got to pay to park. And, it just seemed like, wow, you're taking a lot away from somebody just to get them to come down and have a hearing so they can have you consider, either reducing or dismissing a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to change that system, frankly. But
Yeah.
So Hilary, you mentioned the loss of driver's license. And I think that's, brings up a good point. My understanding is that, fines associated with moving violations can come with that loss of driver's license if you miss a payment. And if you don't notify in advance that you're going to miss a payment. And so that does seem like that creates this terrible ripple effect, because then my understanding is when you want to get your license reinstated, the Department of Transportation charges you also then a reinstatement fee. So then you have, this continuous cycle of more fees, in order to try and maintain your license.
And even if you don't have a driver's license, but it's a moving violation, you can be, PennDOT is notified that you haven't paid. And so if you ever do try and go get a driver's license, you have to deal with that. And that happens to teens for summary offenses and truancy fines. Often.
Underage drinking does the same thing.
Yep.
Okay. And so now, what is there something with those? Do judges have any discretion to prevent the loss of license or step in if there's going to be a loss of license? Is this all stuff that just automatically occurs with fines and fees?
From my experience, the judges have no ability to alter the suspension aspects of those hearings. And it's sad because I think they should, but the way that they are done legislatively, because people will go and try to appeal that part of their hearing. Say they have some sort of marijuana case or something, or a DUI or something, and they'll appeal the aspect of the loss of a license, because they have, these are people that have to go to work and need to get around. And there's, you can get not in a DUI case or a drug case, but you can get what's called a bread and butter license that'll allow you to drive to and from work, but not in a DUI case and not in a drug case. And so people are trying to figure out, okay, well, I'll just appeal this. And honestly, there are some lawyers that'll take their money and appeal the case. And I think they know, I certainly know, the judge cannot change that part. He cannot overturn that. And those are probably it's the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, and God bless them, because they, have brought about laws to, care about people who are being killed and harmed for, drunk drivers. And but that whole license suspension thing is crushing people, and then it becomes repetitive. Oops, I'm lost. Can you guys see me? Oh, okay. I touched a button and I couldn't see any of you. And so you get your driver's license suspended for underage drinking, as Hilary indicated. You don't even have a license yet. You go to get one, and they don't run the time on that suspension until you apply for a license. And so then when you apply, it's, oh, you have a license suspension. And what happens though is that you end up having suspension on top of suspension on top of suspension. And I'm not saying it's right that someone drives when their license is under suspension, but I know that people just feel like they're caught between a rock and a hard place. And so those suspensions end up building. I've known people, I've had clients that had their license suspended, for 10 years, when you mount it all up, and then they can't get a job. They can't go and be a union They can't be an apprentice at a union because you have to have a driver's license. So those are the good type of circumstances that they might say, oh wow, I don't want to do the drug thing anymore. I want to go get a good job, because they're used to making some kind of good money, even though it's not legal. But now they would like to become legitimate and legal, but they don't have a driver's license, and that suspension, has mounted up till who knows when they'll have one. So what kind of job can they even get to without a driver's license? So it's a very difficult situation. And those are some of the things that really do need to be addressed. I thought that a law came into play that said when your suspension, the clocking on your suspension starts to run at the time when you get the suspension, because that's the other part that that the legislative rules have an effect on, is that your suspension doesn't start until you turn your driver's license in, things like that. Or again, until you apply for a license if you don't already have one. So that suspension is hanging out there. Your suspension should start to run when you get it, and then be done when it's done, and instead of hanging over your head just endlessly.
And I'd add also that people are going to get hit even harder on their insurance. So, the cost just keeps snowballing in every which area.
Always why we need good judges and magistrates in these positions making the decisions from the beginning. We keep stressing that in these speaker series. Elect good ones so they're making the decisions right the first time round. So Hilary, we had you on to stress things that we keep stressing over and over. We had you on in an earlier speaker series with Tiffany Sizemore. And we were talking about, what happens with when a juvenile doesn't pay a fine that was assessed, in the requirements. Again, this is why, having people in the position making the decisions right, from the beginning. And, I think this is worth, telling everybody again, because it's so important and just, so, awful what occurs.
Sure.
So what happens if, at the magistrate level, if a juvenile doesn't pay a fine?
Okay, so first let's talk about how that would happen, right? So a juvenile has been issued a summary citation for, say, disorderly conduct or for vaping uptown. And they're sent a notice of a summary citation that goes to their mail at home. And maybe they get it from the mail and hide it from their parents and then don't go to the hearing, or the parents see it and choose not to go. And the system allows for that juvenile to be, quote unquote, tried in absentia and fined without assistance of counsel and without the juvenile there. And we know darn well that a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old who has fines and court costs imposed upon them, while it's in the juvenile's name, the parents are expected to pay that. But when the parents don't pay, the juvenile bears the consequences of that, because it is an automatic non-discretionary referral to the juvenile justice system for contempt. And that results in, this again, another snowball of consequences where they're now involved in the juvenile justice system. And until they turn 18, and when they turn 18 on job applications and housing applications and college applications, they may have to disclose that they've been found guilty of a summary offense or a misdemeanor in juvenile court. And so, the whole idea of fining children and then punishing them for an inability to pay when they don't have money and can't open bank accounts is ludicrous. But what's also ludicrous is that the judges don't have discretion to stop that automatic referral.
Now, when I was, I think part of what Hilary said, that I think sometimes rather than giving a fine, because any fine given to a juvenile, parents either going to pay it or it's not going to get paid. Kids don't, they don't really have jobs. But you can do things more creatively, such as maybe do a suspended sentence. In a suspended sentence, you say, okay, to the child and their parent, I'm going to give you the opportunity to have your charges completely withdrawn. And in order to do that, we're going to give you some community service, and you have a collaboration with various organizations where they can do the community service. That'll be good for them, and they can learn something as well as good for the organization and in their community, so that it's something that's accessible to them. But also, you use that suspended sentence to say, the other thing that I want you to do in this time frame is go to school every day, be on time, bring your grades up, you know, and listen to your parents, don't get in trouble. So you kind of give the parent a hand, because believe me, and I know, I don't know if you all are parents, but kids can be a handful, and sometimes you need a little bit of help to try to keep them, you know, on the right path. And so the court can help you with that and say, okay, now if your mom calls me and says, you know, if your mom comes back and says you're not going to class, you know, or you're not doing this, and then, you know, this is what we're going to do. And a lot of kids, you know, they'll take that opportunity and get in line and do what they have to do so that they can come back and not have the trouble. It works for some, it doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for quite a few circumstances. There was something else I was going to say at a common pleas level. That with fines at the common pleas level, one thing, and you talked about restitution before too, with children, and I represented, I had 4 to 8 cases every day in juvenile court for 4 to 5 years. I loved it. They were both delinquency cases as well as dependency cases. Delinquency for kids in trouble, dependency for kids who are involved in the CYF system. And on the restitution comes into play on a delinquency case. Mm-hmm. And say you have a group of kids, and most of the cases I dealt with were groups. And Judge Cheryl Allen was just a wonderful mentor as a judge. To me, she embodied being the mother of all of these children. She understood the community. She understood, you know, how kids are, what parents need, and what's best for them. And she knew how to fashion her decisions in a way that help these kids get on track and help the parents help these kids get on track. And she always, when there was a group case, say for instance, these kids had gotten in a car and did a joyride. And honestly, it was the first time I ever really thought about it. When I listened to her, she said, you know, do you know that a car is the second most expensive thing that a person buys? The house is probably the first, but a car's next. I never really thought about it. You think of a joyride and it sounds like, oh, it's just kids having fun. It's a joyride. But no, this is a major expense, you know, for a person in their life and their family. And then they wreck the car. Now, she always divided that restitution equally, or if it was vandalism or whatever it was, she divided that restitution equally amongst all the children involved in the case, which to me seemed the fair way to do it. I can recall a judge who imposed, and it was really a lot of damage, all the restitution on one kid. I mean, all the attorneys are looking like, and it happened to be my kid. And I was most unhappy, and really unhappy for my child, and thought, wow, that was really unfair. All these kids participated. So I think that you know, those sort of circumstances need to be looked at. I don't know that you have the ability to impose the will on judges to follow the line of thinking that Judge Allen used, but it would be nice, and it's nice to at least elect judges that are going to be fair, and because if all the kids participated, they should all have to participate in the restitution.
Mm-hmm. So in district, oh, now my voice is doing something funny. Oh, there we go. Okay, in our district, our representative Dan Miller, he is introducing legislation that would provide guidance to magistrates and judges on what to do when someone doesn't pay, how to assess someone's ability to pay, and ways to consider alternatives to fines. And I was just wondering, Hilary, I think you're familiar with that piece of legislation. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. It sounds to me like it's legislation targeted to address some of the issues in the Lopez case that Chelsa's been talking about. This whole idea of making it mandatory for judges to consider ability to pay as opposed to optional, which maybe some judges believe is the case right now. So, the whole idea behind Representative Miller's legislation is, to stop the growing reliance on paying for court administration on the back of the participants, when we know that the participants are disproportionately poor people, right? And, he, having been a public defender for a large portion of his career, understands the implications of these fines, costs, and restitution orders, and some of the lack of discretion that judges have in those on our indigent neighbors in the community, and the lack of discretion given to magistrates, or the lack of clarity about whether or not magisterial district judges have the same level of discretion that Court of Common Pleas judges do when determining fines, fees, and court costs. And the other, I think, really important part about this legislation is allowing defendants to pay their fines, fees, and court costs by using a credit card, allowing them to set up automatic debits from their checking accounts or various other accounts, because right now courts do not have to accept credit card payments. And so that, I think that's a really important part of the legislation, just from a payment standpoint, when we're moving to such a cashless economy, the ability to pay in alternate means. Like, if the court wants the defendants to pay their debt to the court, we ought to make it as easy as possible for them to do so with modern means and modern technology. And so, some of what Representative Miller has written into this legislation would sort of modernize that.
Great. Well, in terms of other things, great things going on in this county, we have the Fine and Fees Justice Initiative. Chelsa, my understanding is that you are part of spearheading that initiative here with Bethany Hallam. Can you tell us about that, how, what it is, and how it came to be?
Sure. So Councilwoman Hallam, our office, and then also a lot of work from the Abolitionist Law Center went into this. So earlier, I guess in 2020, we applied, and like any application, you have no idea if you are going to be awarded. So we were very, very excited when we got the letter saying that we were awarded a monetary award, but also included as part of this inaugural cohort. It's an initiative of an organization called Policy Link. And so they selected 10 different jurisdictions across the country. I think it's great that we not only have Allegheny County, but we also have Philadelphia, which I think also presents some opportunities, hopefully, as we look at things. And they have a pretty big umbrella. So for us, we wanted to look very specifically at how we can forgive those old court debt that we've been talking about, the old fines and fees. But there are other things that other jurisdictions are working on. So as part of this, our office is still conducting a pretty comprehensive audit to look more closely at all of these. ACLU, though, also did a pretty similar study that addresses a lot of this. But just to give some different examples of what the Fine and Fee Justice Initiative points to, eliminating driver's license suspensions for non-payment, eliminating and reforming unjust jail fees, including markups on phone calls and commissary items, reducing and eliminating municipal fines, including reforms to warrants, reducing or eliminating criminal administrative fees, reducing parking and traffic fines, and creating more just practices for the payment of fines. And all of this, of course, goes to the recognition that not just disproportionately poor people, but disproportionately these are people of color who are being saddled with, all of these types of burdens that we've been talking about.
And my understanding is you've been able to work with President Judge Kim Berkeley Clark signing an executive order, and then District Judge McPappas to kind of put this already into practice. He was able through in his magisterial court to also kind of expand it and, already start getting rid of some of these fines and fees.
Right. No, he's doing great work. And Judge Clark has been great to work with. I think just like everything else, though, unfortunately, we would have loved to get a lot more done on this by now. But as we all well know that during this pandemic, there have been many issues that have become, more immediate for our courts. So we are hoping that, once things get back to some level of normal, we'll be able to expand it in different ways. And our work even on that amicus brief for the Supreme Court case that we've been talking about is all part of this. So they're all different components, as Representative Miller's legislation. And that's really the challenge. What's unique about us, I would say, of this 10-member cohort of Allegheny County, and it's a real challenge, is that we are so fragmented. So it goes to everything we've been talking about tonight. So you have the state, you have our Supreme Court with a lot of the decision-making in all of this, not just because of the matter before them, but in terms of their administrative responsibilities over our court. And then you have just local matters. So I see that as being where we are different. and we've seen that across many different areas, not just criminal justice in Allegheny County. We know we're one of the most fragmented areas in the entire country, but that really, it makes it more challenging here.
What I think is so cool about that fine and fee initiative that was implemented was it's not just like a blanket forgiveness of debt, it's an exchange of community service for the debt, which means that, the community is really benefiting in a way that, just receiving money from the defendant probably doesn't provide the same level of benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you guys for being here. Now is where we talk about what you guys have coming up this week, because it's crunch time for everybody. So I'm sure there's a lot of get out the vote events this week. I know Unite has a big event coming up on Saturday, I believe, but I'll let you guys tell everybody about it. More and Grassroots Justice are advocacy groups, so we want to make sure everybody knows exactly what you guys have coming up, and then we will post links to your campaign sites on the recording of this, which will be available online on Moore's page, Grassroots Justice's page, South Who's United page, and available pretty much everywhere online of those pages. So Controller Wagner, go ahead and tell us what campaign events you have coming up this week, where people can support you, and where they can find you this week.
Sure, thank you. So you mentioned the Unite rally that's on Saturday. I will definitely be there. I have a lot of smaller kind of community events throughout this week. I believe McPappas is holding an event with all of the Unite endorsed candidates also on Friday night at Spirit in Lawrenceville. And then our campaign is also doing our final fundraiser. It actually, I think it'll be an interesting one. So we are partnering with the guys that do the Just a Couple Kids podcast. And they are going to come on and do what politicos love best by kind of, giving an analysis of where we are. This will be a Monday fundraiser. So doing a little bit of predictions, maybe even, some fun betting, for a good cause on what different people think. So that will be Monday. And then of course, Election Day on Tuesday. And my website is Elect Chelsa, and I'll spell out Chelsa because I'm commonly called Chelsea. It's commonly misspelled. So that's ELECTCHELSA.com.
Every time Ryan Herbinko's podcast comes on, I always tell him I'll give him a shout out. So I'll give him a shout out too, along with you when on our Facebook post. But we will also post yours. So everybody who wants to support Chelsa Wagner for Court of Common Pleas, go to her Facebook page, which you will find linked under the video. And please donate to her. You can attend her fundraiser, and you will have a lot of fun if you go to the podcast event. Those are some goofy guys. So please support her. We want to support these candidates. We need, these are 3 strong progressive women here that we definitely need on the bench. Okay, Wrenna, go ahead, tell us what you have coming up this week.
Thank you. If you don't mind, Hilary, I'm going to start off with my website, and that's Wrenna Watson, WRENNAWATSON.com. I believe my Facebook is vote, VOTE, Watson, WATSON, then the number 4, and Judge, JUDGE. If anyone would like to sign up to help us out for this 8 days to ground zero. We're working every day, and we'd love to have you join us if you would like to. And we're canvassing every day. I have a meet and greet probably at 5:30 every day this week. And if you have some people that you'd like to invite, just to get a chance to get to know me a little better, please feel free to invite them. You're welcome to come, and you're free to invite them. If you just went to either my website or my Facebook page, I think you could sign up and say, hey, send me the link for the meet and greet. It's not a closed situation. Anyone can attend. And I have things to do every day this week. There's a lot of community activities. I'm sure we're all involved with a lot of things. So it's probably the busiest week of the entire election, to be perfectly honest, and it's exciting. And I thank you again so much for this opportunity, and I look forward to meeting each one of you personally. I know Chelsa, know and love Chelsa, and I look forward to meeting each of you personally and getting to know you even better.
And they can't ask, but I can. If you want to donate to Wrenna, you can go to her website. There will be a donate button to help support her. You cannot underestimate the power of having somebody who has actually already served on the bench in this position and knows what it's like. It is, certainly somebody to support. And all 3 of these candidates, they're asking for events, but one thing that you can help them with is volunteering with Unite to work at the polls on election day.
All right, and quickly, I popped off the video.
Sorry, my cat started to throw up. I was trying to hit mute really quick. Go ahead, Hilary, introduce yourself.
I've done this 7 other times. I know the routine. What do I have going on this week? We're canvassing every night between now and the 18th. And Wednesday night, I have a meet and greet in Mount Lebanon. And Saturday morning, we will be at the Mount Lebanon Farmers Market from 9 to noon in Uptown Mount Lebanon, kind of near Bill Few and Associates and West Banco Bank, the little public parking lot down at the southern end of Uptown. And then we'll be canvassing right after the farmers market. And on Sunday, we have a joint canvass with Lisa Middleman, Mick Pappas, and Nicola Henry Taylor that's launching from my house. And we'll be canvassing in Mount Lebanon and Dormont. And then the last thing we need and would love help with is people volunteering to work the polls on election day. It's really important for the voters who have not been paying attention or who are overwhelmed by the amount of information and choices they have, to be handed a card with progressive endorsed candidates as they're walking into the polls when they're making their final decision. So that's really, I think, at this point, our priority is getting people to volunteer at the various polls on the 18th. You can, I think Unite has a really great sign up link, and then they'll post you at a poll close to home if they have availability for that.
And as always, as I say lots of times, you can donate to Hilary at electhillary.com. I can, not stress enough how much our campaign needs donations. So and all three, great candidates. So, please support all of them. And thank you. This has been great for 8 weeks. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Hilary and Elaine,
Thank
for
you.
organizing it. And Chelsa and Wrenna, it was nice spending the hour with you tonight.
Yes, it was.
To
Thank
all of
you.
you, we appreciate it.